One thing about it, I think, put Colorado on the map when we did form the Division of Aeronautics.
We just tried to set out to solve a problem. This just happened to be the technology that we used.
It starts with good people. If you don't have good people that care about what they're doing, you're not going to go very far.
There's a pioneering spirit in Colorado. The mountains, the plains.
The mindset of the typical Colorado person is self-reliance and the desire to find new and more efficient ways to do things. I mean, after all, these people came out here and covered wagons, and they didn't even have ADS-B or wide area multi-let. They came out here with, you know, the roads were not good. I mean, it was just terrible. It was the worst parts of the Bible.
It's a challenging place to travel, especially via the road. But the pioneering spirit in Colorado lends itself to aviators. That daring spirit, the challenge of the mountains. But it's based in the pioneering spirits of people that have established and developed Colorado.
Elrey Jeppesen was born in Louisiana in 1907. He was fascinated with watching birds in flight as a child, and that led to his passion for aviation. He signed on as an airmail pilot, flying old open cockpit Boeing 40 aircraft. This led him to start collecting data, information about each of the airfields along the route that he flew in the airmail service. He bought himself a little 10-cent pocket binder, and that's where he kept the information. Jeppesen essentially pioneered what was called the letdown procedure for a lot of the airports, because his data was much more thorough than what was being produced at that time by the Civil Aeronautics Authority. In 1991, as the Denver International Airport was being built, it was decided to name the terminal building after Elrey Jeppesen. 1996, Elrey Jeppesen passed away at his home here in Denver.
Rocky Mountain Airways is really about Gordon Autry. He was the founder, the visionary for it. But I think one of the things that was unique about Gordon, he was one of those pioneers. Gordon was a very reliant person, a self-reliant person, and Rocky Mountain Airways was developed using leading-edge technology. And probably the two keys were, one, the airplanes that were flown, and those were the de Havilland Twin Otter and the de Havilland Dash 7, and those were STOL, short takeoff and landing aircraft. Part of Gordon Autry's idea about having an airline was it was self-sufficient. I mean, Rocky Mountain Airways paid for its own landing aids and installed its own landing aids, and then also built this Avon Stolport, which was a private Stolport. There was nobody that was doing full STOL work like Rocky Mountain Airways was in the Colorado Rockies.
Emily Howell Warner is a Colorado gal. She was born here in Denver, raised in Denver. She went to work for Clinton Aviation, which was a Cessna dealership. In fact, it was the first Cessna dealership in the United States, which was located at the old Stapleton Airport when she was about 20. In 1967, she became the first female FAA designated pilot examiner, and in 1973 became the first female pilot hired by a major scheduled carrier. In 1976, she opened the door and basically broke the barrier in what to that point was one of the last male-dominated career fields, and that was in the cockpit as a captain. She became the first female captain on a U.S. scheduled carrier. She opened the door, literally, for women in professional aviation in this country. She was the pioneer, that Colorado pioneer spirit you talk about. She was the first.
Because we didn't do it first, we really had the opportunity to, I think, do it best. And if you look at the way our legislation was structured that created the division, it funded us well, it funded us fairly, it accounted for all aspects of aviation.
We were one of the last states in the Union to create a division. The purpose of the division was to, I think, to, one, support local airports and support them in a number of ways.
And so then when I got in the legislature, that's when I more or less decided we better do something about aviation. And Colorado was the only state that didn't have a focal point on general aviation at that time.
You got to start with Senator Lou Entz. I mean, he was the one that carried the legislation, that created the division. And the story goes, he was the one that challenged Governor Roy Romer to say that aviation fuels, aviation taxes need to be spent on aviation facilities.
All I was concerned is about Colorado, and then this idea of the fuel tax and have the money, revenue generated so that then they could use those funds to match federal funds or state funds and get something done.
And that's the best part about this system, is that we don't get general fund money from the state of Colorado. We don't have any other sources of revenue other than the folks that use the aviation system. So when you're flying an aircraft and you're buying fuel, you're supporting the very system that you use. It's really one of the purest ways to support a transportation system like airports in Colorado.
No money's come out of the general treasury. It's all strictly aviation, generated by the airports, returned to the airports.
At the heart of the legislation is the division is created to assist, promote, and develop the aviation system.
And then we created this aeronautical board to carry through. And we have different people appointed to that board, which is really great to have their expertise.
The board was created to be a representative model from across the state. It was not to be dominated from any one sector. So we have 4 representatives that represent local governments, 2 from the western side of the state, 2 from the Front Range and the eastern side of the state. You have a representative from the pilot community, a representative from the airport community, and an at-large position. That has always brought a lot of balance and a lot of understanding.
I had the opportunity to be involved with the Aeronautical Board for a number of years in previous lives before I came to the division, and it's an absolutely fantastic board. I mean, it's one without personal agendas. It's one of passion. It's one of collaboration. It's a group that really has Colorado's aviation system and that system's interest at heart.
I look upon it as an opportunity to do something I love, passionate about, and to give something back. Both to Colorado and to the airports and GA.
Serving on the aeronautics board was probably one of the highlights of my career, because and it's kind of a humbling experience, because even though maybe you've been in the industry for a long time, maybe 20 years, maybe you're going on 40 years, there's so much you don't know.
Well, you have that certificate signed by the governor that you're serving on that board. It changes the game. I mean, you take it seriously, and you know right away that you are serving Colorado. You're not serving your own personal interests.
I don't know if back in 1989, if the people that were putting this legislation together truly knew how innovative the system was.
I can't say enough to all the people that helped create this, and I'm just that one person.
Colorado is blessed with a really broad and diverse aviation system. And of course, that's really anchored by Denver International, which is the 5th busiest airport in the country. But it's one of just 74 airports statewide, and we have a lot of those airports that provide more than just airline services.
It's then the ripple effect of what the airports do. And in addition to providing transportation,
These smaller airports, many of them are providing the means of medical treatment, flight for life, and that's very, very important.
I think that one of the things that, that most people associate with the Division of Aeronautics is our discretionary aviation grant program. Indeed, about a third of our revenue that we collect every year gets invested back in the system through aviation grants.
Springfield, Colorado was the first time that we really partnered with the Department of Transportation that was reconstructing the highway in front of the airport. So that was a partnership project where we used the highway spec and a lot of the CDOT work that was already done with the CDOT contractor.
When they got set up for a big highway project, then we could piggyback, and there were at least a couple occasions where I can think that we did that, and you know, it made construction of airport projects feasible.
The Del Norte runway project was one of the very cool projects that we were able to do.
the challenge was that the runway facility just was not adequate to the kind of air traffic that would accommodate flight for life.
There's been many lives that have been touched from a safety standpoint, medically, by us being able to do that project.
We ran around the state having surplus property auctions where airports could come and buy a good piece of used CDOT equipment very economically. So if there's still any orange dump truck 1-ton pickups at airports, you can probably thank the CDOT surplus property program for that. That morphed into a conversation with Denver International about what they did with their surplus property.
The surplus program that we have wouldn't happen without our partnership with Denver International Airport. Allows airports all around the state to get equipment that they otherwise wouldn't be able to have, to keep their runways open.
And there's no way in the world that we could have dug our way out of that on a timely basis without those snow blowers and that whole fleet of trucks behind us.
The relationship between Denver International Airport and this division are uncommon. I would be remiss if I did not talk a little bit about Denver's leadership and support of the division, whether it be for the surplus program, whether it be Kim's support of understanding the system. She's a supporter of the system. It's not just about Denver.
It starts with good people. If you don't have good people that care about what they're doing, you're not going to go very far.
When you look at the division, it's always been small. It's never had a big staff. And the amount of work that a small, limited staff has produced has always been impressive.
You have a very small group of people that are incredibly dedicated to help Colorado airports.
Aviation education is one of the things that the division is tasked with accomplishing, and one of the ways we do that here in Colorado is to help airports fund internship programs where a college student can come onto an airport, gain experience, build relationships, learn a little bit about the aviation community, and kind of jumpstart their career. And we're very fortunate to have the resources to be able to help Colorado airports do that. And again, on the division staff, of the 8 of us here today, 5 were interns at an airport in Colorado at some point in our past.
The state and the federal government in Colorado have always worked well together. That is not common throughout the country, but it has always been common here.
More than some places, we've had great cooperation from the federal side, from the FAA.
The FAA loves to work with Colorado because of that engagement, that sincere passion that everybody has that serves on that board to do good for aviation and make it safer ultimately.
It's the World Series of business aircraft. I mean, until you go and see it and experience it, you really don't have an idea of how dynamic and how powerful the NBAA annual convention is.
From 2005 to 2014, we had a 50 by 50 booth, which gave Colorado airports a national voice.
As a manager at Rocky Mountain Metro Airport, we thought one of the best ways to get our name out there to our customers, which are the owners and the operators of these business aircraft, was to attend this annual event.
Each year we went, we learned something new. There was always something that we came back with that we could capitalize on and make it better the next year.
How do you get people into your booth so you can have these conversations? And it was the roping machine.
One year I was persuaded to be Guy Fieri.
We had our own version of Win It in a Minute. Sean's version of Guy was extremely good and worked well on and off the show floor.
It was the partnership of everyone coming together to make this happen.
We just tried to set out to solve a problem. This just happened to be the technology that we used.
The AWAS system, for crying out loud, that is such a critical part of what we're doing here. I mean, as a pilot flying in the mountains, to be able to find out what the weather is in the mountains, that's critical.
And the division decided to put AWASs in places where I'd say God never intended AWASs to be.
So for us to put these at 12,000 feet plus or minus throughout the mountains of Colorado was not only an engineering feat, a construction challenge, and then a maintenance challenge to be able to maintain these. It started out with 12 sites that were identified by the group that put the idea together.
Overall, I think it's a system that the Colorado pilots as a group and as individuals across the country really rely on.
Colorado Surveillance Project, which euphemistically is known as the Colorado Radar Project, Mountain Radar Project. And that started in 2005. Before we had the multilateration phase 1 and phase 2, radar coverage was lost at 10,300 feet in the area around Hayden, Colorado. In the southern part, we lost it at 16,000. And which means that when an airplane descended below 10,300 feet, they didn't know where it was. You could not see it on radar.
Without radar coverage, the airplanes have to act in the non-radar environment, and so until that airplane basically lands on the runway and reports clear of the runway, air traffic control cannot release the second airplane to land. What that did was that took our arrival rate down to potentially 3 and sometimes 4 airplanes an hour.
When we instituted wide area multilateration, we're literally able to see all the way down to the ground.
With the ability to see and sequence those airplanes, our arrival rates were back up to 14, 12, 14, even 16 airplanes an hour.
It increased capacity at these airports. It made economic impacts even better. It made people be able to get to where they wanted to go rather than getting diverted to another airport. And of course, it improved safety. The next iteration of innovation here in Colorado is going to be remote air traffic control towers, and it's a fantastic next generation of how we manage air traffic control at airports.
The concept that we're using in phase 3 is to mesh both the video technologies and the track-based radar or surveillance technologies together to give you a very comprehensive view of not only the airfield, what's going on the surface, but also in the airspace.
The benefit of this new virtual air traffic control tower program is that it will obviate the need to spend all of that capital money to build a physical air traffic control tower, and I think it's really going to be the wave of the future for air traffic in this country, and we're pioneering that technology right here in Colorado. One of the things that I think, if you ask nationally what the Colorado Division of Aeronautics is known for, it's innovation and leadership. I mean, it's amazing to see the innovation that the Division of Aeronautics has undertaken over the last several years, from everything from how we're funded and how we're structured to innovative technical things that we've done, like wide area multilateration that improved safety and capacity at our mountain airports, to our current ongoing efforts to pioneer remote air traffic control towers. First FAA-driven remote control tower program in the country, and we're leading it, we're funding it, we're helping develop that, and it's just continuing that legacy of pioneering in aviation.